Ladies and gentlemen, and to our folks, before I could say it, you brought down the music as opposed to bringing down the house. Everyone, welcome. Good morning all. My name is Cliff Friars. I am the chair of the ENMAX Corporation Board of Directors. I would first of all like to welcome members of City Council acting this morning in their capacity as the shareholder of ENMAX Corporation. It's something we've actually been doing a little bit more of lately than we had in the past. We'll talk about that in a moment. Present with us today are Mayor Naheed Nenshi, Alderman Giancarlo Cara, Alderman Andre Chabot, Alderman Diane Colley-Urquhart, Alderman Peter DeMong, Alderman Drew Farrell, Alderman Dale Hodges, Alderman Shane Keating, Alderman Gord Lowe, Alderman Gail MacLeod, Alderman John Marr, Alderman Brian Pincott, Alderman Richard Pootmans, and Alderman Jim Stevenson. Also a welcome to my colleagues on the ENMAX Corporation Board of Directors. They are Greg Melchin, Margot McAuliffe, Sarah Morgan-Sylvester, and Robert Page. Mr. Charles Rugrock is down at the end of the center table here at the dais, is the interim president and CEO of ENMAX Corporation, and again, my name is Cliff Friars. We are missing from our board today Messrs. Abbott, Hankinson, Lenz, and former Premier Mike Harris, who could not be present for today's meeting. Also in attendance from the ENMAX executive team are Mr. David Halford, Executive Vice President, Finance and Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Helen Bremner, our Executive Vice President, Residential Markets, Mr. Robert Hemstock, Executive Vice President, Regulatory and Legal Services, Mr. James McKee, Vice President, Commercial Markets, Mr. Dale McMaster, Executive Vice President, Transmission and Distribution Services, Mr. Ian Todd, Vice President, Government and Media Relations, Mr. David Wren, Executive Vice President, Generation and Wholesale Energy, Mr. Terry Tyler, Executive Vice President, Chief Technology and Chief Information Officer. And Ms. Leanne Lickness is Corporate Secretary for ENMAX and on the center dais with His Worship, Mr. Rugrock, and myself. This meeting will start with a review of ENMAX with myself and His Worship. We will then proceed with a formal business meeting and deal with the approval of the 2010 financial statements and the appointment of the external auditors. Mr. Charles Rugrock will then present the 2010 year in review, and I want to deal with the question of questions. Opportunities will be provided for members of the public to ask questions during the informal portions of the meetings, which are two parts. The comments of His Worship and myself, followed subsequently later in the program by the presentation after the main meeting, the legal part of the meeting, by Mr. Charles Rugrock. In terms of question management, I will be sitting in the chair. We will not take questions during the actual presentations themselves. After we sit down, His Worship and I will take questions about our presentations for a short period of time. When Mr. Charles Rugrock sits down, he will then take questions about ENMAX for a period of time. There may be questions that we have to refer to other members of the board of ENMAX who are here, and we will do our best to try to answer every question within a reasonable period of time. But I would add that it is a public meeting, and we hope that we have the appropriate decorum, not that we don't expect that, and we look forward to a successful meeting. That said, I would like to call upon Mayor Nenshi to make his comments.
On a point of order. On the agenda, if I may, I note that we do have a copy of what's proposed for business today, but I haven't heard whether or not we're going to approve the agenda as presented or whether there's an opportunity to add items of new business, urgent business.
Alderman Chabot, when we get to the formal meeting, I will make sure you have the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Mayor Nenshi.
Thank you, Cliff. It is not entirely traditional for the mayor to make formal remarks at this particular meeting every year. But my council colleagues and I, in conjunction and consultation with the Board of Directors, thought that it was important that we spend some time talking about where we've been over the last 7 months. You know, these annual general meetings tend to be very formal and they tend to be very rigid. But it doesn't serve Calgarians well for us to pretend that we haven't been through a period of significant change over the last 7 months. And this is a good opportunity for us to reflect on what has happened, why it's happened, what changes have been made, and importantly, what will happen as we go forward. So when this new council was elected 7 months ago, it became clear that ENMAX was a major priority. That will surprise none of you. You know, what we knew is that we had a corporation that was doing some things extraordinarily well. We had a corporation that was and remains a leader in green power generation and in distributed generation, really in the world. We had a corporation whose safety and reliability records are second to none, and a corporation whose employers work hard every day to make sure that every single customer has reliable service, has safe service, has service that they know will be there when they need it. We also had a company that was doing well financially. Market share was growing through the province, capacity was increasing, and things were going well. We also had a company that was thoughtful about what to do in the face of what is, in fact, a major change in how we generate power in Alberta. We know that coal-based generation is out. We know that new capacity that is more environmentally friendly needs to come in. And this company knew that its purchase power agreements will be expiring over time. And it's important to figure out where that reliable source of electricity will come from for all Albertans. But you know, there were a bunch of things that didn't work. And we heard many, many mornings on the radio when we got up about new things that weren't working. And there were a lot of things that were a challenge. First of all, not most important, but first of all, and the thing that probably comes to mind for people a lot, is that compensation at the senior level and at the board level was out of line. It was out of line with what reasonable people would think would be reasonable, but it was also out of line with ENMAX's own policies. There were certainly occasions where a lack of judgment was demonstrated. It's not too much to say that there were examples that showed that a culture of entitlement was starting to take root in the organization, a culture that had forgotten about the people whom it exists to serve and the people who own it. While City Council is the shareholder of ENMAX, we're not really the owners. We're the shareholders on behalf of the people of Calgary who own this asset. And in some cases, it seemed like that had been forgotten. And in the case of the shareholder, City Council, in many cases, Council had not been as engaged in making sure the company was operating in the best interest of City Council, or the City of Calgary, I should say, as it should have been. And we had a lot of options at that point. You know, we could have made a lot of fire and brimstone. We could have made a lot of angry speeches and made a lot of change straight up. But we felt that we needed to be thoughtful about what to do in order to preserve the great value of this corporation and the great value of the employees of this corporation. At my urging, City Council and ENMAX together embarked upon a strategic review. And in that review, working collaboratively, we have developed several measures that really give me a lot of encouragement about the future of ENMAX and the future of ENMAX as an asset owned by the citizens of Calgary and the future of ENMAX as a part of the City of Calgary. We reviewed everything. Your City Council sat down with the Board of Directors in a series of unprecedented meetings with very sharp pencils, going through and looking at all of the elements of operation of the organization, starting with the strategy. We looked very carefully at the business that ENMAX is in. We looked very carefully at the best experts' analysis of the future of the electricity market in Alberta, and in particular the future of the generation market. We are comfortable that ENMAX's strategy, particularly its strategy of working with partners to mitigate risk and move into building its own generation capacity close to the customer, is a sound one, and we have reaffirmed that strategy. We have ensured that other elements of risk mitigation are in place, We've ensured that the financial capacity of the organization is also appropriate for the kind of work the organization does. And we also turned our attention to governance. You all know the big headline on governance, which is that the former CEO is no longer with us. The former chair of the board also no longer with us. But there are other things that we're doing here, and it's not just about that. On the issue of compensation, compensation for the top executives of ENMAX has been reduced by as much as 20%. Compensation for the board of directors has also been reduced. They've both been reduced to be much more in line with similar organizations and much more in line with ENMAX's own policies. The pay range for the CEO for the search that is happening right now has also been accordingly reduced significantly. I remain confident that at these compensation levels we will continue to attract very, very good talent, the best talent, in fact, to help us move this organization forward. But that adjustment has been made. You'll hear Mr. Fryers in a few moments talk about tone at the top. These aren't empty words. This is a significant shift in the corporate culture of the senior management and board of ENMAX. A significant shift to always remember why they exist and whom they serve. This is important stuff. The process isn't over yet. We have more to do. The most important item on the docket right now is to hire a new CEO. We will certainly pay competitive market compensation for this CEO. We want to attract the best person we possibly can, but that compensation range is significantly lower than that which was given to the previous CEO. The next step, as we hire that CEO and in conjunction with that, is to review the composition of the board. We are undertaking within City Council a major review of how we do governance. That includes whom we appoint to boards and the membership of the boards, including the issue of whether aldermen should serve on the boards of our wholly owned subsidiaries. I should say members of council should serve on the boards of our wholly owned subsidiaries. We thought that it was prudent, while we're undertaking that review and while the CEO search is going on, for this board to stay in place. We have requested and the board has agreed to stay in place while we continue that review. I expect that that review will conclude by the time of our semi-annual shareholders meeting, which traditionally happens in the autumn. And at that time, we will contemplate changes to the membership of the board. But in the meantime, it's business as usual. And it's business as usual to make sure that we are both serving our customers well, that we are returning a financial dividend to the City of Calgary, but also that we're proceeding with the future. And your City Council has given this board authorization to proceed with the construction of the Shepard Power Plant, including the search for a partner to help mitigate construction and operational risk. There's a few things I want to acknowledge here. This has been a really tough time. There's no sugarcoating that. It has been a tough time for the board. It's been a tough time for City Council, and in particular, it's been a tough time for all the good people who live at ENMAX, who work at ENMAX, I should say. Some of them probably live there in the hours they're working these days. But I want to acknowledge the fact that we were able to move forward on this with goodwill, with good intentions, and with our hands, minds, and hearts across the organization. I want to acknowledge the leadership of the board who've been willing to engage in this discussion, who've been willing to be able to move forward without holding on to things of the past, who've been open about acknowledging things that have gone wrong, but who've also been open about thinking about how to make things better. I particularly want to acknowledge Charles Rugrock, the interim CEO, and the rest of the senior executive team. It would have been very easy to throw one's hands up and say, this is ridiculous, we don't know where this organization is going. We didn't see any of that. We saw an interim CEO and a senior executive team who continue to work incredibly hard every day with the full measure of their abilities to make this company successful on behalf of the people of the City of Calgary, and I really appreciate that. And I know my council colleagues join me in appreciating their ability to do that. They've been willing partners. This would have been a much tougher process had they not been. I also appreciate my council colleagues who have really been able to set aside short-term political gain for the long-term right thing to do for the people of Calgary and the right thing to do for ENMAX Corporation. Again, it would have been easy not to do that. It would have been easy to score cheap short-term political points. And we were able to avoid that by working together to make sure that we all had a common interest in mind. Most important, and I know many of you are watching on live webcast, I want to speak to the employees of ENMAX. know that the people of Calgary value the work you do every day. Know that we think of you every time we flip on the lights. And know that we understand you're working hard and you will continue to work hard for this corporation. That each of you have made a career choice. That you are spending your career working for a great company, but working for a great company that helps your neighbors every single day. And we value that choice, we acknowledge that choice, and we thank you for making that choice. The organization truly would be nothing without you. Did we have a bad situation? Yes. Are we in a much stronger place today than we were 7 months ago? Absolutely. Are we done? No. Will we continue to work together to take this organization from success to success to success? Yes, we will. ENMAX Corporation has a willing and engaged shareholder in your City Council, and we will continue to work together to make sure that this organization builds on all of its successes in a way that is always serving its owners and serving its customers, the people of Calgary and the people of Alberta. Thank you.
We appreciate those comments. We know, having worked with you over the period, from whence they came. I would like to make some general opening notes. First of all, for the members of the media, there in the press kit, you will find a joint statement on results of the Mayor's review called Moving Ahead Together. That is in the package. The Mayor has referred to it, but we are currently live streaming this presentation of the AGM to the world through the web. Today, we are also releasing our How We Govern document. That is an important document and very much a part of and a result of this review process. Our first quarter financial statements are being released today, and I'd like also to make a special note to the media. What you're seeing as slides will be available in your media package today, so you don't need to scramble to write all this down. It is in your package. So that's a start to help everybody understand, and I will now make my presentation. Now, first of all, I do have some general comments to make. Fundamentally, this review is one of the best things in a long journey that could have happened to ENMAX. Changes have been made, and they should have been made. I have to thank the Mayor for his intuitive understanding that symbols connect to reality, and when symbols are off, sometimes a relationship is off track. I thank him for that. I thank the Council for absolutely being a steadfast supporter of ENMAX. Many of you I've had the pleasure of working with in the past through ENMAX, and frankly, you've been nothing less than extremely supportive and helpful. Thank you to you all, and we've had nothing but that from you at ENMAX from the very beginning. I do want to say that while ENMAX did make mistakes in a global kind of sense, that those mistakes were limited, we hope, to a few people. We are correcting the results of that, and we know that the employees and executive team today are dedicated to making sure things like that do not happen again. So that is one thing. I would also say that this review has been very real and very, very personal, and I mean for all of us. The Council came to ENMAX, and as His Worship said, to sit shoulder to shoulder with the Board of ENMAX around the board table. It was a very personal experience for all of us. It never happened before. In between meetings, our board and the executive team, and I repeat, one hell of a group to work with, worked to respond to Council's information and directional requests. We worked together. It was never been done before at ENMAX, and I do not think His Worship and I are going to allow that model and that collaborative working together to slip away. So again, I thank the Mayor for his insight support. We worked together on this. I'd like to thank Council for, as I have come to know, their collective wisdom. I thank the Board for its support, particularly of me in a being very steadfast in a strong learning period. Personal support was not unnoticed. I would like to thank the Executive for its skill and loyalty to ENMAX. They were very much a part of what happened on a day-to-day basis, and the impact on them cannot be lost. I appreciate it. I would like to thank our employees for focusing on keeping the lights on, as His Worship alluded to. They were a great group, and through this, they were steadfast. So now I would like to turn to what is essentially the results of our review in a little more detail. His Worship started it. I am going to finish it, so to speak. Here we go. As indicated, this review was essentially at the Mayor's behest and the Council, and we were willing participants in it, and each of us contributed in our own way. The first slide I'd like to deal with is tone at the top. I'd like to deal with this generally and say, first of all, that the biggest key in all of this is transparency. ENMAX regarded itself as a corporate island to a certain extent. Transparency has been fundamentally approved by what we have done and the steps we have jointly taken together. That is probably the biggest thing. ENMAX sees itself as a representative of the great city. It is not a corporate island unto itself, and we have to always remind ourselves of that. As one of our board members put on the table, and His Worship and I in Council have adopted, how ENMAX earns profits is equally as important as the level of profits themselves. We have incorporated what we have learned on this tone at the top change into our top principles at ENMAX. We have aligned our tone at the top principles with ENMAX policies, principles of business ethics, sponsorship, donations, travel, business expenses, employee expenses, disclosure and confidentiality, things that matter, like employee and stakeholder events and how they're managed and held, air travel, meals, and it's through the entire organization. We are partially through. We have more to go. We're working on it now every single day. We are all working on it. One other thing we've done is the board has looked at its relationship with the CEO and how that process is managed to strengthen the accountability and relationship. That is one of the changes that has taken place as well. Now let me deal with the question. His Worship dealt with it in part. I would like to deal with it a little more broadly. The one thing we have to look at is, and when we had our first meeting, we dealt with tone at the top, and we looked seriously at what the ENMAX mandate should be when we met jointly in this collaborative way. Let us think about it. Well, first of all, ENMAX had become highly competitive and entrepreneurial. Was that right? Well, we have to recognize, and the City of Calgary must recognize, that 75% of our business is really in an unregulated and competitive market. We are competing with others who are out there trying to cut our grass, so to speak, as we are trying to cut their grass in a business competitive way. We have to recognize that. It's not a regulated business. It's a small part of our business, and extremely important. It's the one that keeps the lights on, but it is not as big as the other part. We have to grow value and sustain the dividend for the City of Calgary. But we all must recognize that in doing that, that is driven largely by the unregulated competitive business in terms of the value of that, the financial impact. We also agree that a great part of our mandate is to lead environmental change. We're trying to lead the change from coal to gas. We're trying to move into distributed generation. We're even looking at electric vehicle pilot opportunities. These things are somewhat more well known. We push those out there, but we haven't been good about pushing the rest out there. We need to give the best value and reliability for our customers. It's a compelling value proposition. In doing that has led to a substantial growth in our market share. I need to point out that when we use the number 43% there, that is driven by what we handle in terms of electrons, both directly ourselves and those we manage on behalf of what we book on behalf of others. But nevertheless, we control, in terms of the customers, a substantial share of the market. Control's not a good word in a general sense, but we deliver electrons to them, and we're very proud that our retail book has grown. We have also acted on behalf of the customers by fighting Bill 50, and humorously enough, again, that's come back into the media in terms of the position we've taken that large transmission projects are not necessary for this province at this time. We also have focused on strong corporate social responsibility, mission zero, safety, and employee satisfaction. So it is Important to recognize that there is alignment with the board and council on the general directions and mandate. There will be differences on different pieces and elements of it. There's no doubt about that. But we are aligned together in those general principles. Let me now talk more specifically about ENMAX's vertical integration strategy. We have to recognize that today our customers are 50% in Calgary and 50% across the rest of Alberta. We are out there with a product called ENMAX. It is an everyday comparison to the rate-regulated option. We need to recognize that that is a volatile, the rate-regulated option bounces up and down. ENMAX has offered a stable pricing regime as part of its ENMAX product. A consumer who had exercised the right to take the ENMAX EasyMax 4 years ago would have found himself financially better off than he would have under the rate-regulated option. So we've actually been successful in through that stability and delivering what we think is a better product than the RRO. Our power purchase agreements, and the Mayor alluded to this, are going to expire one day. These have been a large source of our electricity. Together with coal plant retirements, our retirements of our own PPAs coming from coal, retirements of the coal generation facilities, for example, TransAlta's Sundance plants was just announced in the month and a half ago that they were being retired early. These things have created a need for generation. Vertical integration to deliver gas build-out is where we need to be, and we all agree on that, as Mayor alluded to that. Vertical integration to gas generation is both an environmental and a fair price solution. Now let me go to the next slide, which gets to say on pay. Let me first address this. In the world today, the tug between shareholders and boards and executives is taking place, and it's coming together at one level. What is commonly called a say-on-pay discourse and a debate. The current say-on-pay strategy, accepted by, for example, the Coalition for Good Governance in Canada, is that the way you do this is you have your shareholder have a say on pay, but the board is directly responsible for that in a legal sense. So what we have done is come up with a balance. Number one, as His Worship said, pay for performance and expectations relative to competitive markets are very important. We know that we have to compete in a competitive market. We are launching our search for a COO, as His Worship pointed out. We now know what levels we will be doing that at. Here's how it works. If you look at this in some specificity, you'll see a column there that says former CEO 2010 actual. The salary was $700. The annual variable pay was $630. The long-term variable pay was $1.6 for a well-publicized total of $2.9 million. You have to look at the elements of that. Part of it is incentive-based pay on a short-term basis. The long-term variable pay is in essence a substitute for options in a public corporation, because we can't give our executive team options as you would in a public corporation. Working together, you see a new CEO on-plan performance in the center in blue. You will see on the left, the new CEO significant underperformance is limited only to the base pay. You'll see on the other side a new CEO outstanding performance, which has to be exceptional performance before one could ever reach that level. But you will see that in essence we've worked together to realign the compensation to be competitive, yet take into account where ENMAX sits as a city organization, where ENMAX sits in the context of competing in a general market. So that slide, we hope, is disclosure of where we're going and what it's about. Now, how did we get there? Well, if you turn over to the next slide, you'll see that we've worked together to develop a new peer group. There are 23 members of that peer group in terms of how we set executive compensation, and it is also linked to board compensation, as I'll review in a minute. This new peer group is both private sector peers and public sector peers. The split is approximately 70% to the private sector and 30% to the public sector. Now, why is that weighting relevant? Well, it's relevant because we're trying to draw executive team leadership and our CEO out of a market that we have to compete with, so we get the right caliber of executive. You also have to take into account that ENMAX is not entirely a monopoly, as many of the people of the public sector sphere peers are. We're also in the competitive market. Some of these are government-owned, some are not. Finding the right balance is what the board and council struggle with on a day-to-day basis. We retained a second set of consultant eyes at His Worship's suggestion. We had one set of eyes look at it from an executive compensation point of view. We had another set of eyes look at it from the point of view of the board and council. We also asked them to address the question whether there's another way to set compensation in a competitive market, and they basically came back and said to us all, not really. So we went back to the peer group comparison. It's kind of a mug's game in a general sense, we all recognize that, but as you're seeking people from that peer group to come and join you and lead you and be part of your executive team, you must take that into consideration. So that is the essence of how the compensation was arrived at. We're not all in agreement that every element of that is right, but it's where we are today. Now I'd like to talk about the board-shareholder relationship in a little more specificity as well. Let me deal first of all with board member compensation. First of all, we are trying to align the peer groups 100%. That's something the mayor and council would like us to do. It's a little bit difficult because some of the people that are in the executive compensation peer group does not provide board information, but we are working to match that as close as we can. That has resulted in some downward changes relative to the board, and we expect we will continue to work on this. The council and the board will now review the peer group annually, recognizing both the competitive environment and ENMAX ownership by the citizens of Calgary. But please recognize, this is effectively, they have the mayor and council sitting as the shareholder have the right to set that compensation completely and utterly. We have nothing we can do except make recommendations. It's a little different than executive compensation, and it's appropriately so. So we ourselves recognize the need for change, and we have made those changes. Insofar as the board and director nominations are concerned, much discussion about that. We made a presentation relative to how the process we followed. In the past, we made changes to that process. We've tried to make it more robust and more independent-minded. I think it's important to recognize that after thinking about it, we've all agreed that it should be more in a business model rather than simply a community model. We are content with that, and we're going to continue to do that. So we want a business board. We will continue to make the nominations, and we do have a step to go because, as His Worship said, there's a piece of this yet to come. We need to look at the robustness of our board in the context of the changes that are coming, maybe with the council and maybe with our own board turnover. We had 4 members turnover last year. We're going to have to look at that question. There's so much yet to do. But there is one thing that's come out of this. The fact of the matter is we will be working, yes, at odds in some respects, but that's a minor piece of it. We will be in harmony working towards trying to figure out what is the best board for ENMAX at the end of the day and continuing to have the success we've had in terms of finance. We have learned a lot. We have made significant changes. We think they are the right things for ENMAX. We're going to continue forward. And that said, I will return to my seat. Now, that brings us to the question period for His Worship and myself. Is there anyone who would like to go to the microphones to ask His Worship or myself a question with respect to what was put up there? Thank you very much, sir. And could you, as a courtesy, state your name?
Yes, my name's Mel Techmeyer. Mr. Fryers, with transparency, certainly what ran through my mind was what is the compensation of the board that you have worked out?
I don't have that slide with me, but I think for the board chair it's dropped as much as? It's dropped to 160,000. In the case of the board members, it's down less, but it's down. I don't happen to have the slide with me on that. Apologize. We're to publish that and make it available immediately. Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Patricia Brownlee. I'm a concerned citizen. I've been around watching ENMAX the last 10 years. I have a specific question about income that comes in as the administrative costs on our bills, the public's bill every month, the $6.65%, $6.60 or thereabouts. Is it on a sliding scale? And also, in the past, that was a contract with a company called Accenture, which was part of Enron. So all those years, like 5 years, I imagine many multi-millions of dollars didn't come into your coffers because you subcontracted out. Who here knows about that? Thank you.
Well, it appears there's real interest in that question. I don't think, Charles, I turn it over to him, but I think he's too... Can someone in the executive address that question? Terry Tyler will go to the microphone and address that question. Thank you, Terry.
Terry Tyler, the Accenture is not a part of Enron in any shape, form, or fashion. They're an independent, publicly held company whose headquarters is in the Cayman Islands. And we did outsource our customer care and billing operation to them. The administrative fee is the same fee that's charged based on the regulated rate option that's set by the Alberta Utility Commission and is a part of our normal filings. On the unregulated side of the business, we merely match what that regulated rate administrative service charge is for any area that we do business. If we're in EPCOR service territory, it's their admin service charge, et cetera. So that is a rate for the provision of billing, customer care, et cetera, that is set within the normal rates.
Thank you, Terry. Now, are there any more questions? We've got a question period for Charles and the operations at ENMAX that are coming at the end. I'm thinking more specifically of questions for His Worship and myself. Sir, what's your name?
Jonathan Sundstrom,
Yep.
just a taxpayer. Just a couple quick questions pertaining to the mayor and to your comments there regarding the streaming of the AGM, which I think is good. My question there is, will that be put up online thereafter for people to see it in the event they couldn't see it right now? One. Two, you also mentioned about a media package. And I presume under the transparency thing, that media package would be available to the general public so they'd be able to read it because this is a transparent process, correct?
I'll answer those questions both positively. The presentation, the streaming that's taking place will be on our website, as will the package.
All right, and will you be ever contemplating streaming the previous AGMs for people? I've asked 4 times, but I've had no response.
We aren't planning that and probably wouldn't.
Sorry?
Are they up there, Ian?
Well, the ones that you recorded to put them online. No, just to put them online, like a YouTube, like on your website. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the formal, we're getting to the formal meeting, Alderman Chabot.
I just wanted to respond to your comments.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Oscar.
Yes, Mayor and Mr. Fry and board and executives. My name is Oscar Feck. I heard a lot of good things being told this morning, but reality is, why aren't we being accountable to the taxpayers? You all know I ran as a mayor-to candidate. I spoke my mind. ENMAX is making at least $500 million profit. The taxpayers only get about 50, 60 million. I know it's not funny, but it seems like
It would be great if they were making $500 million.
Well,
Ooh, so many tunnels I would have. But sadly, sadly, the number is just not accurate, Mr. Feck.
Mr. Mayor, I did put an offer on ENMAX buying it. They gave it for sale to the public for $1.2 billion. I offered $1.4 billion because I knew ENMAX had a lot of money in the bank. They had 900,000 shares. Where all those monies went, I could never get an answer.
Oscar,
Yeah.
you're making a statement. Have you got a question in there?
Well, my question is what is just said earlier, but ENMAX has 1.4 billion debt, and just months ago they borrowed another 340 or 60 million. You know, this goes on and on. ENMAX is doing so good. They're borrowing money from the public and putting it in the main coffers. Where are all those monies going? The public taxpayers want to know.
Okay, Oscar, we'll end it there, but we will, during Charles, we'll make a note of that, and we'll deal with the debt. Oscar's question? Okay.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at answering the question now. ENMAX debt levels have come up over recent years, and if you look at the size of the business and the growth of the business, that debt has helped finance the growth that we've seen in the business. You'll see some data shortly when I do my presentation that speaks to the growth of the business. Over the last 10 years, ENMAX earnings have gone up over 200%. The ENMAX dividend to the city has doubled. The ENMAX asset base is up 6 or 7-fold. So yes, has our debt grown? Yes. Has the value of our business grown? Yes. That money is used to finance growth in the business. The big piece of our recent borrowings went to finance growth on the regulated side of the business is tied to growth in the city. As the city grows, we're required to provide infrastructure for the new homes, the new subdivisions in the city. The regulator sets the level of debt for those investments at 60%. We're required to borrow money to finance that, and we recover it through the rate base. So is our debt growing? Yes. Are we achieving good things as a result of that growth in debt? Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll go over to Alderman Chabot.
Actually, Mr. Friars, I wanted to talk about the potential of adding an item onto the agenda, so I have no questions specifically based on your presentation, so I'll defer.
Okay, Alderman Colley-Urquhart, your light is on as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's really no other place on the agenda, the way it's set up, to comment on the remarks given by His Worship, Mayor Nenshi, and yourself. And I really want to thank both of you for your comments. They go a long way to addressing some of the issues and concerns that all of us on the board, as elected officials and Calgarians, have had to deal with over the last 7 months or so.
Thank you.
I think it's a good format going forward that this be part of the formal agenda. It's very, very important. So just a few comments that I'd like to make. I can tell you that probably all of us, in one way or another, were tarnished with the same brush of what happened. And I wanted to reemphasize again, over the years, I have had many opportunities to work with the executive team of ENMAX, and they are extraordinary individuals with a lot of talent, and I know that this must have been a very difficult time of transition, and I'm happy that you stayed the course and stayed through this. I've heard from many employees, of course this is the old Calgary Power days, and I know that these employees take tremendous pride in their work, as Mayor Nenshi alluded to, and I know that the Mayor intends to speak more extensively to the employees of ENMAX. So I think that's important to say. And to you, Mr. Chairman, I certainly, as a member of council and as a shareholder, have had to bite my tongue a significant amount during this period of time. From the early days when you said that we just had trouble around the edges, to today, to recognizing that there were a lot of learnings that had to happen in order for this company to continue to succeed. But I will say that in one way, I'm pleased that the board is going to see us through this transition while we finish the work. But I will tell you that time will tell. I want these documents to become living documents so that it's something that we all can be proud of, and that council will be much, much more engaged in kind of watching the outcome of the results of your presentation as well. So at the end of the day, I wanted to send the message that this is not the company of a few executives or any particular member of council or the shareholder. Let us never, ever forget that this is a company, the greatest asset, the biggest asset that all Calgarians own and invest in and are proud of to this day. Thank you.
Thank you. Your worship, any final, and then we'll move on to the formal part of the...
Well, I'll echo what Alderman Collier-Cart just pointed out, which is that while there have been some problems, as I stated earlier, we're working hard on fixing them. And I think I would echo what Alderman Collier-Cart said, is that the most positive part of what has happened over the last little while is the creation of a really new sense of how we work together as the shareholder and as the corporation. And we'll continue to do that. And these will, in fact, be living discussions. I suggested in my remarks that there's a couple of areas that we're working on now. We will continue to finalize those in this time of transition, but I hope that we manage to create a new working model here where council, while not micromanaging the organization, certainly will operate as an active and an engaged shareholder going forward.
And I echo those comments completely. Alderman Chabot.
Thank you, Mr. Friars, Mr. Chairman. So in the past, I need to predicate my request to add to the agenda based on the last AGM. At our last AGM, Alderman Hawksworth at that time had indicated that he was going to be retiring, at least from alderman, and potentially seeking higher level of office. And at that time, there was a member of council's name that was put forward. And based on the presentation that I heard this morning, on the basis of that we want to try and maintain continuity in regards to our board and look at how we can transition into possibly new members of the board based on a particular skills matrix that's established through policy. Insofar as members of council are concerned, of course, we don't adhere to the same skills matrix requirement. And so what was put forward was some alternatives at the last AGM, and we appoint members to committees at our organizational day, with the exception of a few committees, one of which, respectfully, is ENMAX. It's the only opportunity we have to appoint members of council to ENMAX is at the AGM, which is not based on a particular skills matrix. So I would like to put that on the floor, or add that to the agenda, the opportunity to either ratify the current appointments of council until such time as we determine whether or not we want to continue to have members of council on this board or not, and like I say, either confirm or make changes based on the only opportunity that we have to appoint to the board.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll leave your discretion on whether to add that item to the agenda or not. I would suggest that the issue that Alderman Chabot is raising is, in fact, an issue for City Council to manage. And as part of our ongoing review, that is certainly a question that we will be asking. If we choose to keep members of City Council on the boards of our wholly owned subsidiaries, then the question of how they're actually appointed and what term would be an important part of that. If, however, you'd like to add that to the agenda today and see if it's the will of the shareholder to make a change now, that's certainly your prerogative as chair.
My inclination, while I understand where Alderman Chabot is and his concerns in that regard, is that we are working towards a significant review of that up to October, and I would prefer if council stuck to its path to do it then. But I will basically say that I don't think it's appropriately on the agenda today, Alderman Chabot, but we're all working towards that resolution in October, November.
Yes, and Mr. Friars, if I may?
Yes, you may.
Although this may be the intent, it's not a typical practice, and this board is who appoints members to this board.
Well, the situation, the current environment is there is no resolution on the agenda today with respect to board appointments because the entire board, including the two councillors, are staying in position because there's, until we do this review. So there's no need for any resolution whatsoever.
And respectfully, it's, I guess the disconnect exists in that we appoint at organizational day, and kind of what's being suggested here is that we defer this till organizational day. What organizational day has come and gone for this new members of council, for this new council, which did not provide the opportunity for us to appoint at organizational day to this committee. The only opportunity with this new council is today.
Alderman Chabot, we will let, effectively, council sits as the shareholder representative. We'll let council make that decision.
Great
So we'll
idea.
put it on the agenda for consideration of the council members on the board of ENMAX. That being said,
New number 6, appointment of Aldermanic reps to the board.
yeah, appointment of aldermanic reps to the board will become a item number, before item number 5, it'll become a new 5 and a 6, yeah. Thank you, Your Worship, for that. Thank you, Alderman Chabot. I think we've come to a good resolution on that. So now, that said, the Secretary has informed me that a waiver of notice has been provided by Mayor Nenshi as shareholder representative, and the quorum requirements of the voting procedure resolution have been met. Notice of the formal meeting, the legal meeting, has also been provided to the shareholder, to each director, and to the auditors of the corporation in accordance with the amended and restated bylaw. I therefore call this meeting to order. We will deal first of all with the, and you will note that if you go to it, that you will, under tab 3, find 2010 audited financial statements and the annual report. That is the first item of business, the 2010 audited financial statements and annual review. The 2010 financial statements were audited by the firm of Deloitte & Touche LLP. I would point out they're not only the auditors for ENMAX, they are also the auditors for the city. The annual financial statements and annual review were reviewed by ENMAX's Audit and Finance Committee, as chaired by Greg Melchin down on the far left there, and were approved for submission to the shareholder by the entire board of ENMAX Corporation on March 9, 2011. This material is in your meeting materials, as I pointed out. Before I call for a motion on the resolution before you, are there any questions from the shareholder representatives? Alderman Chabot?
Thank you, Mr. Friars. A couple of questions, if I may. Just allow me to find the appropriate pages here. I should have preempted this, but I think I had put some folds in my pages. Well, I guess the first generic question, if I may, is in regards to when we enter into contracts to acquire equipment, specifically power generation equipment, and I guess my main focus is going to be around the Shepherd plant. That we've acquired some equipment, and having been in the purchasing and the sales game myself, I know that there are typically people that promote products and as such are entitled to receiving some sort of compensation. And there's also opportunities for manufacturers to deal directly with end customers. So my question is, I guess in regards to some of the equipment that we've acquired, was it based on a deal that was struck directly with the manufacturer, or was there some sort of intermediary? Was there any compensation paid to somebody for a finder's fee, that sort of thing? And if so, any idea on the order of magnitude of what that would have been?
Alderman Chabot, Mr. Charles Rugrock will answer your question.
In the case of the major equipment purchases from Shepherd, all of that equipment is purchased through ENMAX supply chain process. We don't engage a third party or compensate a third party to assist us in that process. We use our own internal processes and typically use competitive bidding unless the equipment is very specialized and required to be single source.
Thank you for that, Mr. Rugrock. If I can take you to page, I think it's under section 8, income taxes of the financial report, if I may. There's 12.8 carry forward amount referenced, and I didn't see the specific detail on what that entails. If you could maybe give me some additional clarity on what that is.
Perhaps call on Mr. Halford, our Chief Financial Officer, to help me out there.
Yes, the center mic. Mr. Halford.
Thank you. Perhaps if you could just be a little bit more specific in terms of what the question is in relation to taxes?
Okay, future income tax asset,
Yes?
under 2010, loss carry forward, 12.8 million, that's referenced in the financial statement.
We have a number of companies, some of which are, and many of which are in taxable status. We have other companies, however, that do have losses in those companies, and those losses would be available for carry forward to offset future taxable income, and that's what that number represents.
Okay. I did have another question. It's in regards to, I think it was listed under environment. I'm trying to find it here now, where there was a reference to us having to pay for new environmental regulations imposed on us by the federal government for greenhouse gas emissions, specifically on coal-fired facilities. On those coal-fired facilities, in the coal-fired plants that have gone offline, was there an amount that was allocated to that we need to either have removed from what's outstanding or what's owed into those organizations? Has that been factored out?
In terms of, we do have obligations on the go forward for costs associated with the greenhouse gas emission reductions. We do pay for those in association with the PPAs on a go-forward basis as part of the costs that we remunerate the PPA holders for.
Maybe I wasn't clear in my question. I'm referring to some of the coal-fired facilities that have gone offline or that are projected to go offline. If we're paying into the future, did we pay monies that we probably shouldn't have in light of the fact that they're going offline?
We pay those costs on a go-forward basis on the annual costs associated that are incurred in the year in which they are incurred. And when our PPA expires, we will cease to be responsible for those costs after the cessation of the PPAs. So we have not paid for.
Maybe I could just help
beyond.
clarify. I think Alderman Chabot, for clarity, the two units that went offline earlier this year, we were not contracted. We did not contract power from those units, so they don't impact our financials.
That really clarifies the good question.
My apologies.
Thank you. Thank you for that. No further questions.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Chabot. Will there be no further questions? Oh, there is one. I see Alderman Wong.
I noticed in your 2009 report that you had commented that you would be IFRS standardized by this year. I noticed that we're still reporting in GAAP, even though that two of our subsidiaries are not really allowed to do that. Can you explain why we have not transferred over?
Mike.
Tom.
John.
A few reasons. Yes, our objective was to be in a position to report on an IFRS basis, and in fact, behind the scenes, we are doing so, getting the systems in place and working well to be able to do that at a time when we are required to do so, which is at the end of this year. We do have some systems changes that are yet to be made that will make our reporting processes more efficient. And there's a belief that there'll be a lot of learnings from others who are implementing IFRS reporting this year that will help us improve our processes later. So this is a case where we've chosen not to be the leader, but to be a very rapid follower and learn from the learnings of others as they implement.
Okay. I also noticed that we are still listed as only a BBB plus debt rating, although we have moved marginally from negative to stable. What exactly are we doing to improve this?
I don't think we have an objective necessary to improve the rating, but we certainly want to maintain an investment grade rating. We're quite comfortable with where we're at right now.
Okay. I also noticed that there's no specific listing for the direct heating plant on 9th Ave. Do we have a bottom line or expected profit for 2011?
I think district heating, the district heating business is a business that will evolve as we fill out the plant. It'll become more and more profitable. As you know, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, the City Municipal Building was our first customer. We've signed another contract recently with Bow Valley College, and we expect to see significant growth in the customer base for that facility over time. So I can't specifically tell you that we're going to see solid contribution from that business in 2011, but certainly very quickly thereafter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Demong. There being no further questions, may I please have a motion to move the resolution before you? Moved by Alderman Lowe. Is there a seconder for that motion? Alderman McLeod. Your worship, would you care to call the preliminary vote on this motion, resolution?
I sure will. So I request and for the folks who are new to these ENMAX AGMs, this is sort of a strange procedure that we follow. I get to cast the only vote, but they don't let me vote without them telling me what to do. So we'll have a preliminary vote of the City Council sitting as shareholder, and then I will cast the vote. So I request that a preliminary vote be held on the resolution that the shareholder of ENMAX receive the 2010 annual audited financial statements and the auditor's report and the 2010 annual review for information.
All in favor of the resolution? All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is therefore carried.
Great. So based on the results of that preliminary resolution, I will vote in favor of the resolution.
Thank you, Your Worship. We now go to tab 4, the appointment of the external auditors. The next order of business is the approval for the appointment of the external auditor. This material is under tab 4 in your meeting binders. This matter was reviewed by the Audit and Finance Committee and Board of Directors in March, and we are recommending the appointment of Deloitte & Touche as auditors of ENMAX Corporation. The Board of Directors is asking for authorization to fix the remuneration of Deloitte & Touche for audit work associated with the 2011 fiscal year. Are there any questions before we proceed? Hearing none, may I have His Worship poll?
Sure. I'll request that a preliminary vote be held on the following resolution, that we approve the appointment of Deloitte & Touche and that we authorize the Board of Directors to fix the remuneration of Deloitte & Touche for the 2011 fiscal year.
All in favor of the resolution? Oh, we need a mover and seconder. A mover? Thank you. Alderman Farrell and Alderman Chabot. Thank you very much. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is therefore carried. I wish they all went that easy, Your Worship, eh?
Oh, my
Your
life
Worship,
would
you
be
cast the
so
vote?
much easier. Based on the results of the preliminary resolution, I vote in favor of this resolution.
That concludes the formal portion of the meeting. May I please have a motion to terminate the
not
end?
yet.
Sorry.
Alderman Chabot.
Yes, Alderman Chabot. We have a motion from Alderman Chabot that we open for discussion and consideration and appointment the issue of the City Council members to the Board of ENMAX. Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Alderman Colley-Urquhart. Discussion.
So does that then leave the only, oh, I'm sorry. Are you recognizing?
I'm
sorry.
recognizing you, Alderman Chabot.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Friars. So at the moment, the only two appointments that we have on the table are Alderman Lowe and Alderman Pincott for consideration? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if someone else wanted to be considered, they would have to, put their name forward or get nominated? What's the process?
They could simply put their name forward in the context of the council sitting as shareholder representative is all powerful and can do whatever it likes today. In the context of the structure we now have and have agreed upon in the past is that there will be two representatives, and those two are continuing. So we effectively have to ask for a vote on those two, create the vacancy, and add someone new, Alderman Chabot.
Okay, well, short of having someone else nominate me, I would certainly like to be considered to be on the board based on my past experience in the last 20 years in the electronics industry, and I believe I would be an asset to the board. So if that's the process, then I would like to put my name forward for consideration as one of the members of this committee.
Members of this board. We have the preliminary question then to deal with. Should I simply call for the question on that, or should we first deal with the question of the existing members on the board?
Point of order?
Point of order,
Yeah,
Alderman Stevenson.
What is the motion? I thought the motion was that we bring this forward for consideration.
Yes, it is. That is the first motion. I'm working what the process might be.
That would be the right way to do it.
Yeah, I'm also working what the process might be so everybody understands what we're actually considering here. What we are considering, sorry, Your Worship?
I was just going to say, I think the right way to do this, the motion on the floor is to consider the nomination.
Yes.
Let's have a discussion about that. Let's have a vote on whether we want to open the nomination process.
Right, that's
If
exactly.
that vote fails, then the current board members continue. If that vote passes, then we'll go through a nomination process.
Okay.
Your Worship, on a point of clarification,
Sorry,
Where
on a point,
Alderman Marr.
thank you. So typically, when we're doing organization at city council, and I think we're talking about city council right now as part of the shareholder, we do this during the organization period in October. Is that
This
not-
particular one, we don't, Alderman Marr, and that's, I think, why Alderman Chabot had his concern, that this particular one, for whatever reason, council's practice has been to appoint the aldermanic representatives at the AGM, and, well, there's only ever been 3 of them,
No, and I appreciate that.
and 4, actually.
My
And
question,
they've sort of stayed on
4.
forever and ever.
Alderman Hodges.
my question then is, if we were going to do this, that was normally done during the time period which we would reaffirm or make changes to the board of ENMAX, this time I would refer this to city council, to the organization day.
And I
I'll
think
take that as, sorry, I'll interrupt,
Go
Your
ahead.
Worship. I'll take that as speaking against the motion. But we have a motion on the table. I think the thing to do, the motion is to reconsider the composition of the board in the context of the council representatives. That is the motion moved by Alderman Chabot and seconded by Alderman Colley-Urquhart. I am prepared, unless there's more discussion, to call the question. Alderman Farrell.
Thank you. I'm going to vote against the motion. Council has agreed in its normal governance process to review whether or not it's appropriate to have council members on our wholly owned subsidiaries. We have yet to have that discussion. We've also agreed to delay any changes to the ENMAX board until the semi-annual general meeting. So I think this is premature to those discussions. So I will not be supporting the motion.
Okay, is there anyone else would like to speak from the shareholder representative before I call the question? Okay, Alderman Chabot, you could close.
Thank you, Mr. Friars. So briefly, I'll just say that the intent when we did this last time was to make sure that we had some continuity on the board from members of council, as it was indicated by Alderman Hawksworth, that he would not be there for the first 6 months. And so we appointed on the basis of that we wanted to make sure that we had somebody on the board until such time as the shareholder made a decision on reappointment of those individuals on the board. So we are at that crux now where we have to make a decision whether or not we want to continue to have representation on this board and who we should have on that board in the interim. And this being the opportunity on a yearly basis to appoint to this board, I would hope the council would at least consider either ratifying or changing the composition of the board. And at this point, all that's on the table is whether or not we want to consider ratifying the previous decision or not, or reappoint somebody new. So close. Thank you.
Alderman Chabot, I'll take those as concluding comments, and I'm now going to say, Your Worship, can we call a poll on the question?
Yeah, so we'll have a preliminary vote on this matter. Again, what we're voting on is whether or not to open up the question of the aldermanic representatives to the board at today's meeting. So if you vote in favor of this resolution, it means that you're willing to have a nomination for those representatives. If you vote against it, it means the 2 representatives will stay on for the current time period until our semi-annual meeting. Clear?
All those in favor of the motion, please indicate. All those opposed to the motion, please indicate. All those abstaining? Okay, would those who voted against like their vote recorded in the record? Yes. Voted against?
So
Point of order.
Point of order, sorry.
Should we call the roll? There seems to be some confusion as to the vote.
I just need who voted against to put up their hands again, please.
Those who voted
do you
against.
want to do a verbal roll call? Would that be easier for you?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, why don't we just say their names, except for me?
Thank you.
Next, I go at the end.
Okay. John Carlo Cara,
No.
Andre Chabot? Diane
yes.
Collier-Cart? No. Alderman Demong?
Yes.
Alderman Farrell?
No.
Alderman Hodges?
No.
Alderman Keating?
Yes.
Alderman Lowe?
No.
Alderman McLeod?
No.
Alderman Marr? No. Alderman Pincott? No. Alderman Pittman?
No.
Alderman Stevenson?
No.
That's 10 noes.
All right, so in that case, I will cast the shareholder vote against that resolution.
The motion is failed, so we will then take a motion to terminate this portion of the meeting. Moved it, Alderman Chabot, seconded by Alderman Hodges. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Great.
Abstentions, none, it's over. Thank you very, very much for the formal part of the meeting. Let me now say that I would like to now call upon Charles Rugrock, our interim president and CEO. I'd also like to recognize him for what he has done. First of all, our interim president and CEO is a former head of Syncrude, and we went out as a board member pursuant to our annual peer review, our strategic review, and our skills matrix to find someone who would be very skilled in the management of and build out of major projects. Well, to say that we found a stellar individual would be an understatement, as Mr. Rugrock was responsible for the build-out of the Syncrude expansion, which I think was some $8 billion. And while we're building out $2 billion, we thought he would have the appropriate experience to help us do that. We brought him on board. He's one of the last members of our board to join. And he came into this, what I'll call the troubles. And at the time when things got really down for us and we needed an interim CEO, we were all unanimous in recognizing that he had the skill and ability to do that from his recent days at Syncrude. He has been nothing but stellar. His worship made a special point of recognizing him as well. He's built a great relationship not only with his worship, but with his board. He's been phenomenal. We thank him for what he did, and about now he's saying, when is that guy going to shut up? Thank you, Charles Rugrock, our interim president and CEO, with a presentation of where ENMAX is today.
Oh, thank you, Cliff. You could read my mind. Good morning, and thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I'd also like to extend a special welcome to those that are participating via webcast, and in particular to my many coworkers out there in Cyberland. I do trust that the technology is working as we expect it would. I'd like to take a few minutes this morning to share with you some of the highlights coming out of our business in 2010. Much of the data I will share also includes some history, so you can see a little bit of where we came from. As a newcomer to the ENMAX organization, one of the things that stands out for me is the solid progress that we've made growing our business over time, and in doing so, growing the value of the ENMAX asset for the shareholder, the City of Calgary. 2010 was another good year for our company. I'll show some trend data in a minute, but let me start with some highlights. We saw continued growth in the number of customer sites we serve and in the volume of electricity and natural gas that we supplied to our customers. Revenues for the year topped $2.4 billion, and the business delivered net earnings of $178 million. And we invested almost $400 million in support of growth opportunities for our business and to improve the reliability that our customers have grown to expect. And finally, we paid almost $62 million in dividends to our shareholder, the City of Calgary. My next slide shows how we have grown our customer base over the last several years. After a bit of a slowdown in growth through the economic downturn in 2008 and 2009, we made solid gains in 2010. Our total customer site count is up almost 40% over the last 4 years, and we continue to see good opportunities for further growth. As you might expect, the growth in our customer base also translates into higher sales volumes of electricity and natural gas. In 2010, electricity sales volumes increased 5% over 2009, and natural gas volumes increased even more, up 7% over the prior year. And looking back over the last 4 years, the results are even more impressive. Electricity volumes are up over 50% over that time period, and natural gas volumes have more than doubled. Revenues in 2010 were only up modestly last year, with somewhat lower prices offsetting the impact of the volume gains we made. You can nonetheless see the upward trend in revenues that you would expect to see from the continued growth in our business. Just as a point of interest, not obvious on the graph, but over the past 10 years, I mentioned this earlier, ENMAX revenues are up over 200%. Net earnings in 2010 came in at $178 million, down from a very robust $206 million in 2009. In 2009, we saw significant one-time gains that did not recur in 2010. These gains were related to gains from foreign exchange exposure on some equipment purchases and long-term service contracts, some gains on an interest rate swap on some financing on our Calgary Energy Center that has since been hedged, and some revenues from prior periods that were approved by the regulator on the regulated side of our business in 2009. If we were to adjust for these one-time effects, earnings in 2010 were actually up slightly over 2009. And again, on an earnings basis over the past 10 years, our net earnings are up almost 300%. Return on equity, while somewhat lower in 2010 due to the decline of net earnings, still remains a very robust 10%. As I noted earlier, we reinvested almost $400 million in our business last year. This included investments to support growth and to sustain reliability in the city's electrical systems, and investments in new generation capacity. ENMAX expects to invest a further $400 million in 2011 on additional projects on our regulated transmission and distribution business, and for the continued development of new generation facilities. ENMAX continues to provide a stable return in the form of a dividend to our shareholder, the City of Calgary. Last year, that dividend, which was based on net earnings in 2009, totaled almost $62 million. Our dividend policy calls for us to pay out the greater of 30% of the prior year's net earnings, or $30 million. We have also at times paid a special dividend beyond what the policy calls for. This policy, in my view, strikes a good balance between providing a good return to our shareholder while giving ENMAX the resources we need to continue to grow our business. It's noteworthy that since its creation, ENMAX has paid $574 million in dividends to the City of Calgary. So to summarize the financial piece, I'd characterize 2010 as a good solid year for ENMAX, and one in which we started to see some good signs of recovery from the weaker economic environment we came through in 2008 and 2009. The company is in a solid financial position to pursue further growth, and in doing so, to bring further value to the shareholder. I'd like now to shift gears and speak to some aspects of what we do at ENMAX. Clearly, a big piece of our business is the supply of electricity and natural gas to our customers. In Calgary, we're also responsible for the transmission and distribution network that moves electricity to them. And they expect these systems to be highly reliable. In 2010, ENMAX invested $132 million in improvements to our transmission and distribution network in the Calgary area. Some of this was to support growth in the city, but a significant portion of this investment went towards upgrades to ensure that our systems continue to operate safely, efficiently, and reliably. Our approach of consistent maintenance and consistent electricity infrastructure upgrades has paid off. When compared to other Canadian Electricity Association members, ENMAX Power ranks in the top quartile when it comes to the frequency and duration of power system interruptions. This makes the Calgary and area network one of the most reliable in Canada. Our involvement with infrastructure in the city also extends to the LRT system. Last year, we started work on the latest LRT expansion, the west leg of the system. ENMAX Power Services Corporation has been contracted to do the utility relocation, as well as the design and install to design and install traction power, signals, and communication systems for the project. The design work for this project is nearing completion, and the project has moved to field construction. We expect construction on that project will be complete in the second half of next year. Another key area of focus for ENMAX is meeting the growing demand for electricity by building natural gas-fired generation close to our customers. We made significant progress towards this objective in 2010. The Crossfield Energy Center, ENMAX's gas-fired peaking generation facility, completed its first full year of operation. This facility can produce up to 120 megawatts, enough electricity to energize almost 50,000 homes. It can start up quickly, in less than 10 minutes, helping to close the energy gap during rapid temperature changes, supply outages, and when the wind doesn't happen to be blowing. We also filed an application for the Bonnybrook Energy Center. Bonnybrook is a 165 megawatt natural gas-fired cogeneration facility that will be located just southeast of here in the Bonnybrook industrial area. The plant is a combined heat and power facility, with the heat used in neighboring industrial applications and for district heating, something I'll come back to in a minute. We currently expect this facility will begin operation in late 2013. And in November, ENMAX received Alberta Utilities Commission approval to construct and operate the Shepard Energy Center. The Shepard plant is an 800 megawatt natural gas-fired generation facility capable of providing enough electricity for over half of the City of Calgary's current power needs. Site preparation work is underway, and we expect the plant to be in operation in mid-2015. Now, my last slide, I touched on thermal generation. 2010 marked a milestone for us in this area as well. We officially opened the Downtown District Energy Center in March of last year. This facility has the potential to provide heat for up to 10 million square feet of new and existing residential and commercial space. It's a first of its kind in Calgary and one of the largest non-institutional district energy systems in Western Canada. It has been providing heat to its first customer, the City Municipal Building, for over a year. And this past March, we announced our second customer, Bow Valley College. The new south campus of the college will be another first, the first commercial building built in this city without its own boilers. We're excited about the potential for continued growth of district energy in both the downtown core and the adjacent new developments in the East Village. Given that this is a rather unique project, I have a short video that provides some additional background. If we could start the video, please.
The Calgary Downtown District Energy Center began operations in March 2010, providing heat to its first customer, the City Municipal Building. The facility, located at the entrance of the new gateway to Stampede Park, is a unique, modern 23,000 square foot building, ushering in a new era of energy efficiency to the City of Calgary. The facility incorporates high-efficiency boilers fueled by clean-burning natural gas. Customers are connected to the facility through an underground pressurized thermal distribution system. This closed-loop pipe system delivers hot water, typically around 120 degrees Celsius, to the customer's building. In 2012, Bow Valley College's new South Campus will also be heated entirely by the District Energy Center, marking the first time a Calgary building is going up without a traditional heating system. A historic moment for Calgary. District Energy, another bold step towards providing more efficient and lower greenhouse gas emitting energy for Albertans. A brighter energy future, and ENMAX is making it happen.
I hope it gives you a bit of a sense of what the District Energy Center is all about. It's really an impressive facility, and we really look forward to how it can change the way the downtown core and the East Village in Calgary is heated. Now, one of the things that brought me to ENMAX was its culture of innovation and how the company has strived to be a leader in our industry. This leadership includes providing our customers with choice when it comes to options to meet their energy needs. In 2010, we launched Generate Choice, a program that responds to an interest by Albertans in options for simple, more affordable, maintenance-free solutions to generate their own power. Generate Choice solutions have a moderate upfront cost and monthly user fees, and we are seeing strong interest in this program. Over 7,000 people have joined our Generate Choice online community, and we have 25 people signed up for solar and 1,800 for wind installation assessments. We're currently going to the field with this program and expect to see many new installations in Alberta homes soon. I spent a lot of time talking about what we achieved in 2010 and some of the key areas of the focus for the company. I'd like now to spend a few minutes talking about how we do all it is that we do. I think it's fitting to start by talking about something that both His Worship and our chair talked about earlier, the tone at the top. When it comes to how we do things, how we earn profits is equally as important as the level of profits we earn. We know we're accountable to our shareholder and to the citizens of Calgary. And that accountability is the cornerstone of how we look at our obligations when it comes to corporate responsibility. In 2010, we took a number of steps towards a more comprehensive and coordinated approach to our corporate responsibility activities. Among those was the development of a corporate responsibility vision, which is highlighted on this slide. A more fulsome summary of our efforts in the area of corporate responsibility is outlined in a summary included in our annual report. And a even more comprehensive corporate responsibility report will be available on our website in June. I've spoken to some examples of how corporate responsibility is already part of our business, such as our vision of alternative energy generation and our commitment to providing customers with reliable, efficient, cost-effective electricity. There are two specific areas under our corporate responsibility umbrella that I'd like to highlight. The first is our focus on safety. Not too many years ago, we were a long way from where we needed to be in terms of employee safety. We recognized that we needed to improve. In 2009, we formalized our improvement efforts with the launch of Mission Zero, a long-term strategy with a vision for an injury-free ENMAX. And we've started to see some very positive results. 2010 was the best year ever for safety at ENMAX. I'm still not satisfied, and won't be until we have an injury-free workplace, but the organization should be justifiably proud of its progress thus far. The other area I take pride in is our commitment to give back to the communities in which we do business. In 2010, we invested $2.8 million in supportive activities focused on youth, the environment, and safety, with an emphasis on enhancing opportunities for family and community participation. The images on this slide show some of the programs supported by this investment. Gen E, our ENMAX Renewable Energy School program, continues to grow with 2 new solar photovoltaic installs in Calgary schools in 2010. This brings renewable energy installations to 8. The program provides teachers and students with a better understanding of the environmental benefits, economics, and generating capacity of these alternate technologies. ENMAX's support of pond hockey in Alberta is now entering its 2nd decade. More than 4,200 kids across Alberta have participated in this program. And the ENMAX School Safety Program, it's a program that educates grade 5 students on electrical safety. The program has existed for over 30 years and reaches 10,000 Calgary students annually. My second to last slide shows some of the ways that we've been recognized over the past year. While we're not in the business of chasing awards, I see it as a bit of a barometer in how we're doing, particularly when it comes to corporate citizenship. And finally, I'd like to recognize the people that make all the good things I just talked about happen. We have over 1,600 employees at ENMAX. They're extremely dedicated and talented, and I'm consistently impressed with the quality of people that work in our organization. Our successes in 2010 are a reflection of their hard work, their innovative ideas, and their relentless focus on safety, reliability, and customer service. Our people do, and will continue to, drive us forward towards an exciting energy future. Through our customer-focused approach, our new generation projects, as well as our commitment to dependable transmission and distribution, our people will continue to build on ENMAX's vision to be a leader in our industry. I want to thank you for your attention today, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rugrock. We will now take questions, and Charles will take them from his seat or from the podium as he wishes. Are there any questions?
Good afternoon. My name's Michael Kostashuk. I'm a taxpayer and a ratepayer. Question, actually first a comment. Thank you very much for this presentation. It's been very informative. I've noticed in the material in the presentation that there's a strong indication that ENMAX is going to be pursuing entrepreneurial private sector businesses, I would assume to increase the revenues. Are there specific Southern Alberta or Western Canadian objectives that ENMAX is pursuing to increase the private side or the entrepreneurial side of its business?
I'd say in the near term, we're actually just in the process of doing a bit of a strategic review for the business that looks a bit longer term to update where we're at today. But we've had a great deal of success with the vertical integration strategy that that is the cornerstone of our business today, in which we pursue growth in the retail business and underpin that with appropriate generation. We still see significant opportunity to grow on the retail side of the business. There's still a significant portion of Alberta that gets supplied under a regulated rate option. So clearly that is one area, one cornerstone of continued growth for the business. We have some other businesses that have matured significantly over the last few years. We've got a business where we provide internet services to business, and that business has grown significantly over the last few years. We see some continued potential there. So we're still working through the process of looking for other ways, obviously, to grow. Our focus is very clearly on continuing to grow our business and in the process of doing that, to grow value for the shareholder and ultimately for the citizens of Calgary.
Thank you. And one other question that was key, and the material is fairly thin on it. There is a significant amount of debt that ENMAX is carrying, and I'd like to see ENMAX address specifically how it's going to be controlled and reduced in the near term.
I think I commented a little bit earlier on the debt. One of the reasons for taking on debt, a proportion of it on the regulated side of the business is actually driven by the regulator. We have to carry a certain debt to equity ratio, and about half of our debt is related to that side of the business. On the competitive side of the business, that debt has served us well in terms of our ability to grow the business. We obviously need to be mindful at the pace at which we continue to grow the business and need to see some return on our investments to allow us to continue to manage that debt go forward. We're certainly committed to maintaining the kind of debt rating that we have today, but at the same time want to continue to pursue growth in the business to deliver the value that our shareholders are looking for us to deliver.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Joan Techmeyer, and I have a concern. The CETA, this Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement that Harper has been working with Europe, is going after services. What is the Calgary Council and ENMAX, what's your view on as they push to get services delivered by private sector all the time?
Your Worship.
Well, first of all, CETA has nothing to do with the last sentence, Joe, but it has a lot to do with the other. And we are, in fact, working hard on this as a council. Our Intergovernmental Affairs group at The city is keeping a close eye on CETA along with our colleagues at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and there are a few things in the agreement as it's currently negotiated that would significantly restrict the ability of the city's municipalities to control our own procurement processes, and that is certainly something we're keeping a strong eye on and advocating for the needs of municipalities.
Next.
Bill Maniluk. I'm a residential property owner in the city. On page 57 of your report here, it talks a little bit about the Shepherd investment, and it mentions that the engineering, procurement, and construction phase would begin in 2011, but $235 million has already been spent. I was wondering what that $235 million has been spent on.
The lion's share of the investment on Shepherd to date has been spent on procurement, so perhaps we haven't got it worded quite right. The major equipment is pretty typical on big projects like this. You have to get in the queue early for long lead time equipment, and so it's the gas turbine generators that have been procured for the project, and in fact they're complete and ready for shipment to the site.
Next.
Charles, maybe you can just say a little bit more on that last one. I understand that given the devastation in Japan and so on, I remember you telling the shareholder about this, that it turns out that that was a pretty prescient purchase because there now is no more capacity to build these things. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, that's right. You know, I can't say that definitively that Mitsubishi, who is supplying our gas turbine generators, their facilities weren't severely damaged in the earthquake, but these generators were built in Japan. But the whole earthquake in Japan has put a whole lot of strain on generating facilities worldwide, and so it is fortuitous that we were far enough ahead in the queue that we're now not having to compete both on price and schedule for our generating facilities.
Thank you. Next.
Jonathan Sundstrom once again. Just a couple quick observations here. It is probably just past 12 o'clock. Now, these meetings have historically been held on the May of a long weekend, which to me seems to be rather obtuse for people to come down in their own time and dime to attend said meetings, and therefore, as with today, you have a tunnel meeting. So is this going to clip the time allowed for people to ask questions?
Well, that is a very good point. As the board, we will address that. Largely, it's driven by the timing of the release of the material and organization, but we will look at that question. It's a good one. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, just because right now it is, what, 12:05, I presume, or thereof?
Yep.
And yet you have a meeting with the tunnel. Now, ENMAX, let's say hypothetically, is worth, say, $3 billion or $4 billion. Obviously, that even ENMAX's debt eclipses your serious issues to deal with the tunnel. Fair enough, I respect that, because time becomes a constraint. I guess my issue there is, it seems like the last...
That meeting starts at 2, JJ, so as long as you don't go for an hour and 45 minutes with this question, and I hope it's getting to one, we should be okay.
Okay, well, no, because in the past, Your Worship, questions were cut off specifically at 12 o'clock after last year is a perfect example.
Well, we've made no motion, no advance to cutting off questions. We're still going strong, and so if you have a question, ask it.
Most certainly do. I guess my one question I want to go back to is unanswered questions from previous ones, and that was part of the reason I tried to address, say, the board or the council or ENMAX and or Ian Todd pertaining to previous AGMs. I'd ask questions and they weren't answered. So now, historically, 3 years later, I'm waiting for questions like, i.e., 100% owned by the City of Calgary. Why would ENMAX not just hold this meeting at City Council chambers and save this money? We have all the recording facilities there. Take that money and divert it to more proper safety issues, which I'm going to address here in a moment. But that was a question I asked last time, and I was told that ENMAX wouldn't warrant to attend at City Council meetings.
The process we've developed for the management of these the annual shareholder meeting is more a comfortable public one that would follow the model of a public corporation. You put an interesting question on the table. At this point, I don't think I agree with you, but we'll address the question of the location of the meeting. But it's a good point. We'll look at it.
Okay. I guess the other one, sorry, Charles, welcome to the world of ENMAX and what have you not. You made one comment there that kind of got my attention. That was pertaining to safety, being a paramount concern. ENMAX is the company that after someone calls in, let's say a 311 request to repair a street light, ENMAX is actually the company that's charged with repairing the street lights after roads determines what the problem is. Historically, from what I understand, it's 30 to 45 days before that street light is repaired once it reaches ENMAX's desk. To me, that is a serious concern because it's a safety and liability issue. And pertaining to previous issues of entitlement, what really rankled me was it seemed to be more important to have a little self-inclusion parties as opposed to public safety issues. I think of, in case in point, in July of 2009, on Bow Trail, where a woman was sexually assaulted with 2 burnt-out streetlights. I also think of the woman that's killed in that tragic accident on 16th Avenue and 36th Street where their lights burnt out. I'm not saying that was ENMAX's fault or issues, but I would like to see ENMAX and the City of Calgary, i.e. roads, work together much better for lighting and safety as a priority.
Is there a question? The question is, are we focused on the question of street lighting?
Yes, as a priority.
Charles?
Yeah, maybe just a couple comments. You know, we have what I think is a fairly good process to try to prioritize what we do in terms of streetlights. A lot of people may not appreciate it, but there are almost 100,000 streetlights in the City of Calgary. And at any given time, 1% of them are out. So we're talking about 1,000 streetlights out in the City of Calgary on any given day. And so you can appreciate, within the constraints, you know, trying to manage our business, it takes some time to address each of those. And our process tries to prioritize them, for example, on the basis of things like if we have multiple lights in one area, so we have a large area out, those clearly go to the top of the list. But you know, I certainly recognize, I hear what you're saying, and we continually look at look at ways that we can try to improve that process. But it is a challenge. You have to run hard to keep up with the rate that streetlights
no question.
burn out in the city.
I mean,
so thank you.
I understand that because that's
Thank
what I
you.
say when I see advertising versus repairing something. That's really critical to me. A couple of other things that weren't addressed here, that there always seems to be issues that arise with ENMAX that because the time constraints aren't necessarily answered. There was a $30 million lawsuit against ENMAX. I just wonder if there was a quick comment as to that was pertaining to the monthly service charge, I believe it's 3.25%. Quick comments?
We don't typically comment on matters that are in litigation.
Okay.
Thank you.
There was nothing pertaining to the Sterling engine. Don Braid had met with Clifford Friars in December talking about introducing the Sterling engine as a new piece of the ENMAX strategy, but I didn't hear or see anything here whatsoever about that.
I didn't have any meeting with Don Braid that I'm aware of, but aside from that fact, the Sterling engine is a part of our micro distribution things we are looking at. We've done the solar, we've done the wind, we're looking at the electric car. One of the other things we are looking at is bringing in the Sterling engine. That is still in part on our agenda. We're still working towards that objective. I think that's the short answer.
Yeah, maybe the other
Charles.
comment I can make is that micro-generation part of the business, one of the challenges we have right now, and the same holds true for the electric vehicle part of the business. Sometimes you don't realize the impacts of global incidents. Electric vehicles are very difficult to acquire right now because of the incident, the earthquake in Japan. We have the same problem. Ironically enough, the micro-generation facilities that we have been using are supplied out of New Zealand. And you can guess what area of New Zealand they're built in. They too were impacted by the earthquake in New Zealand not too long ago. So supply has been a bit of a challenge. So you didn't see it on the screen, and obviously we're not going to charge ahead when availability is not there. But all good ideas for us to continue to look at into the future.
Okay, sir, I think we've answered enough questions.
Okay,
There's
so now-
people standing behind you that would,
But
I
by all
think would
means,
like to come
I
up.
respect that. Here's my next question to
Okay,
you
this is
before I
your
leave.
last question,
I
sir.
have additional questions. Where would I forward them to? And would they be posted in public forum so if other people are interested in your responses?
Ian, could you make sure this gentleman has my address or Charles' address and send them directly to Charles, and we'll see they're answered as
Excellent.
best we can.
All right, thank you for your
Okay,
time.
we're going to take 2 more questions, and I think I see 2 more people there. Sir, you're welcome.
My name is Martin Havacek, and I'm a residential customer. My question is about energy conservation and specifically about metering for residential customers. I wonder if ENMAX is planning to have time of day metering with variable rates to encourage conservation.
We don't have imminent plans for that, and there may be somebody on my executive team that is closer to this issue of smart, we call it smart metering. in terms of what the future outlook might be. At the current time, I don't think it's particularly economic, and we didn't see the level of interest there. Clearly, there's people that are interested, but anybody in the executive want to add to that? Helen, perhaps?
Thank you. Helen Bremner. Yes, we have looked at smart metering. At this stage, we are not progressing smart metering as part of our smart grid strategy, but we are looking at retail and consumer offers, including conservation and energy efficiency.
Okay. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. Next question, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Helen Mowat. I have a couple of concerns. I also see that the climate is a little bit different than last year, of which I'm really quite a neonate to come down here and attend your meetings, where I was cut off last year, where it was shut off at 12 o'clock, and the arrogance and the control and the power and the greed modeled to me an IMF demonstration of the gentleman that thought he could get away with things. And I hope that we begin to change here in Calgary. I've lived here for 40 years, and sadly, I see the same thing happening in all levels of government.
And you have a specific question, ma'am?
Yes, sir. I think we might have to change, if you listen a little differently and connect the two minds along with your heart, you might have a changed forum here.
I will do my best.
Yes, I would appreciate that, because I see it in Charles. I am concerned about the contracts. I see them being not open and perhaps transparent with various corporations, large international, multinational corporations in the world, like you just mentioned, Mitsubishi. And I feel that perhaps our contracts have to be more open and transparent, rather than one single contract to one person. You mentioned that sometimes there's only one person in the world that makes the contracts or whatever, or does the machines. But I really do think there's a lot of that single contracts being done, I believe, at the single sourcing, done at the city as well. And things have to change.
I'd say I'm pretty comfortable at ENMAX that we've got a good process where we go out to competitive bid wherever there is a reasonable slate of suppliers. In the case of a big gas turbine generator, Mitsubishi makes the state-of-the-art, the most efficient generator, and that positions us. Implementing that technology positions us to provide you, the citizens of Calgary, the lowest cost electricity. And it'd be wrong for us to invite others in who might be lower cost, but at the end of the day will result in you paying more for your electricity. So agree wholeheartedly that we have to pursue competitive bidding whenever we can. There are selected situations where we can't, and where it makes good business sense to not do so, but I think we've got a pretty robust process in ENMAX to encourage us to go out to bid wherever we can.
Can I just mention one thing? I happened to bring an article down from the newspaper regarding the ENMAX late fees, where there's a class action suit. And if you really, an ENMAX person could not be reached, and there also, we believe it is a violation of the Interest Act, which is over 40%. So if you really did care for your shareholders, perhaps those fees would be much more transparent on your bills, as well as maybe not charged like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyway, generally you're not there for us.
I'd like to think we are there for our customers. We're not going to comment on the litigation. We're quite comfortable that we have a very good position with regard to the litigation, and I think the future, the outcome of it will speak for itself.
Okay, we're going to take this gentleman's question and then call it to a close. Thank you.
I'd like, it's Mel Techmeyer again, and I'd like to sort of end on a positive note. Your Worship, I'd like to thank you and members of council for bringing ENMAX to task, asking for some accountability and ethical management amongst the management and board. So thank you very much as a ratepayer for doing that. My one question is with regard to membership on the board. I think as a ratepayer and citizen of Calgary, I think that we need continued membership on the board. We might need a little more transparency and clairvoyance from those members as to what's going on, but I think as the owner of that citizen of Calgary should be represented on the board. Now, if there's a good reason that we're not represented on the board, I would like to hear that.
Well, you know, Mel, I really appreciate what you're suggesting, and that is one of our next steps is to look at the overall composition of the board. I should mention that the majority of the board is made up, in fact, of citizens of Calgary, though we do also, and explicitly have said that we need some great people from across the country. Everyone's a Canadian, I believe, right, Cliff?
Yes.
But we do need some great people from across the country with different levels of expertise. But the majority of the board remains rooted in Calgary, not just the council members, and they're people who are ENMAX customers and use ENMAX facilities every single day, just like the rest of us.
Thank you very much. Your worship, that's a good comment to end with. There's no need to have a motion. This is the informal part of the meeting. I declare the meeting terminated. I thank every one of you for your questions, for your interest, particularly given the history of the last 7 months. Again, I thank His Worship and Council for all they've done for us, and I thank the board for all it's done for ENMAX and the executive team. Couldn't have done it without you. Thank you, everyone.